everyone. Welcome to another edition of IDW's Creator Spotlight. Super exciting day today. We are kicking off IDW's new line of original content with the anthology series Dark Spaces, and it's being spearheaded by an absolute legend with his 5-part Heist series. Please help me welcome to Creator Spotlight, Scott Snyder. Hi, Scott.
Hey, how are you doing, Sam? Thanks for having me.
So good. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for joining us today. Cannot wait for the first book in Dark Spaces. It's called Wildfire. Please tell us all about it.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm so excited about it. For me, I think a lot of my work lately has veered towards the maximalist, where I've been doing a lot of big kind of genre stuff that also has a lot of supernatural elements or has sci-fi elements or has monsters and mayhem and that. And one of the things that really excited me about this project and this series was going back to ground, doing really personal, dark human stories set in the real world without any kind of supernatural or metaphysical kind of elements to them, but real dramas, but absolute high stakes kind of Elmore Leonard, like lockbox kind of not pot boiler so much as just like absolute high drama narratives. So for me, when Mark pitched me that, and he's like, why don't you use this as a space to do incredibly dark, psychological, real world kinds of tales, I was in from go. So that was sort of the pitch about the context of it. And then the story that we came up with, Wildfire, for me, I had been reading a lot about, I think, just injustice in different ways, and I came across this article initially. I think it was in the Atlantic, but then it was an excerpt I learned from a book called Breathing Fire by this author, Jamie Lowe. And it's a great book. And she sort of spent time in one of these women's convict firefighting units out in the California wildfires. And the book really paints incredibly vivid portraits of these women and the incredibly hard and valiant work that they do for pretty much no money, like $2 a day. And the way in which they go about saving not only houses and land, but lives, and really aren't sort of aren't recognized in many ways for that. And so it felt like a good environment to tell a story about people who've really been challenged on every kind of systemic level, and sort of have an opportunity suddenly to kind of flip the script, even though it comes at a very high cost. So for me, that was the impetus. So it's a heist story. It's about these 4 women on the line in a certain fire crew in the California wildfires. And one of them knows about a house uprange up on the mountain that might have kind of a big stash in it that they can get in the time limit that it would take to kind of go up the mountain and come down before anyone notices. And so it becomes this kind of should we or shouldn't we do it story, and it gets crazier and worse from there and darker. But it's a personal one, and I'm really grateful that they that IDW is so supportive.
Absolutely. I mean, it's super interesting. What kind of research went into writing about these inmate firefighters?
A bit. I mean, my primary source was that book, but also one of my best friends growing up, Dante Williams, he's like, I've known him since high school, is actually a CO, a correctional officer in Mount Vernon. And so I talked to him a lot as well about what it's like to work with inmates day in and day out, how close you get, all those kinds of things, to how well you get to know people. So I've tried really hard to not make it a story, for example, that's about their crimes, their past, anything like that. You don't even know what they did, the 4 women, to wind up in prison. It's really about the idea of who they are now, who they are on the line, and what they're trying to achieve, and how they're sort of how in a lot of ways they've kind of lived with a lot of odds stacked against them, and at the same time they're they're trying to do the right thing, even when the wrong
Definitely.
thing is presented to them. So
And I love seeing you
yeah,
write an all-female team like that. It's great.
it's a lot of fun. And I mean,
Yeah.
Hayden Sherman, I feel so lucky to be paired with. I mean, one of the things I told Mark Doyle when we came over, and one of the fun thing about working at IDW is, you know, Mark Doyle is literally, he's my first editor. He's the person that found me out in the wild when I was desperate to break into comics and writing short fiction that was like comic inspired. And he and his wife at the time, girlfriend, Janine Schaefer, came to a reading that I was doing for a friend of mine from this anthology I was in, and they came up and asked if I was a comic fan. I had comics with me, and so working with Mark is a dream, and also Maggie Howell, who worked on American Vampire with us at Black Label forever in DC. So they're a group that really wants to make special books, and I think the way Hayden came into it, Hayden Sherman, was Mark pitched me the idea of making sure that on all the stories that we're going to do for Dark Spaces, you always work with somebody not only have you not worked with before, but has a really different style than you're recognized for in some way artistically. And that was hugely exciting to me. So Hayden, their art is just, you know, next level. And I love, what I love the most about them is how passionate they are about bending the rules visually, or bending convention visually when it fits the story emotionally. So it's a really dazzling and immersive story that feels all enveloping. You know, it's not rigid, even though it's a very grounded story. It has this kind of heightened emotionality because it's almost like a fever dream the way they draw it. So I really love it for that reason.
Fever dream is the perfect way to describe the art in this book. I absolutely love that. And it's also, at its core, it's a really exciting sort of high stakes heist story. What heists or heist movies or heist books did you kind of look to when you were plotting this one out?
Oh, I mean, I'm a big fan of like a lot of old pot boilers and that stuff too. But you know, I think heists in recent times they're having like a rebirth between like real stylized ones like, you know, Baby Driver, to more, I think, cerebral ones like Inside Man. And there's a lot of, I think it's a great genre that isn't kind of explored enough, especially I think in times of desperation, or times of real kind of, I think, social, when there's a highlight or a spotlight on social injustice. I mean, heist can function in all kinds of ways. If you look back at noir in, you know, from the 30s to the 50s, and the ways in which it kind of expressed, I think, a lot of the rage and anger and frustration and fear that people were feeling in times of social turmoil. For us with this, the fact that the women on the line really feel like they have no options, and that they're entrenched in a system that promises certain things when they get out, and isn't going to deliver those things at all, and instead is going to kind of leave them to fall, feels like the right, it felt like the right sort of battery and engine for a good heist kind of noir, California noir, up in a sort of fire-eaten mountain.
Absolutely. And for retailers who are looking at Wildfire, they're like, oh, I really want to know, like, when people come up to me and they're like, why should I buy this book? What would you say that they should tell people? Like, what makes Wildfire unique? What makes it exciting? Who would you recommend it to? What makes it different than everything else that's out there right now?
Well, it's definitely different than anything I've ever done. I mean, for me, I think I have, like, again, like, I can get pretty robust and expansive in the mythology and the supernatural and the monsters and all of that. But the stories that a lot of the stories that I grew up on that I loved are those really sort of paranoid spiral noirish tales. And so this is something you definitely won't get anywhere else from me. You know, really grounded, dark, deep psychological drama that's like edge of your seat, nonstop from beginning to end, lots of twists and turns. Mystery thriller and kind of psychological maze of a book. So I'm really proud of it. And again, like, just visually, and the kind of the collaboration with Hayden and with Rhonda as well, the colorist, I feel like if my goal is this, like to really kind of give a thesis about it. I've been really lucky in comics, and I've had a chance to do a lot of things, that I always dreamed of doing, and working with characters that I've always wanted to do. And at this stage, my goal is to just really not only just make the best stuff I can make, but stay exciting to myself and to challenge myself to do new things. And so this book really exemplifies that, I think, in a way that you haven't seen me do something that doesn't have horror or sci-fi or in a very long time. So this is something that for me is a place to go to really focus in on the kinds of stuff that I love, that Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips do so well, and a bunch of like that kind of that sort of a modernized version of that throwback to the Heist is what I really wanted to do here. And Hayden has just not only embraced it, but elevated everything with it. So really just over the moon about this one.
Absolutely. And I can see why in your conversations with Mark and the folks here, why IDW Originals was really the perfect home for a book like this, that gave you the space to be able to do something completely different than what people expect from you at this point.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing I'd say, like, part of the whole goal was with Dark Spaces was to be able to be kind of a welcoming, welcoming lane for new talent as well. And a lot of the people that Mark and Maggie and everybody there are bringing in are, people that I know internally that they made me aware of, some of whom I was aware of before, that I really think are great talents that should be celebrated in comics, that are new voices from, the entire sort of range of creative backgrounds. So I'm really proud to be a part in that way. Like, if I can, shine any kind of light on the work that's going on at IDW in terms of elevating new creators, I'm grateful for that too. So yeah, if you stay tuned, there'll be big announcements about other things coming through the same pipeline that were a big part of the deal of working there, was getting to be a part of something that you're proud of, where you're seeing a lot of up and coming and new creators being supported and celebrated and lauded.
I know that means the world to me and to our audience as well. Scott, thank you so much for joining us here for IDW Creator Spotlight. It has been such a blast having you, and Dark Spaces Wildfire issue 1 is in stores on July 13th. So don't forget to pick it up. Scott, thank you again so much for joining us today.
No, thanks for having me, Sam. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you guys soon.
You bet. Bye, everybody.